Well, Shabbat Shalom. I just want to welcome everyone to the Sabbath Day conference call. This is Barbara, and I'm serving as your host today, and Brother Pete is here as your co-host.
And I'm right online. This is going to be great.
We just want to welcome all our family and friends that are here today with us, and we invite everyone to go to our website, lunarsabbathday.com, for a lot more information about the biblical calendar. Today, this is our title. Why did Constantine outlaw the biblical calendar? And the decrees of Nicaea legislated into place an entire counterfeit system of religion with its pagan solar calendar.
Absolutely.
Constantine the Great is widely known as the first Christian emperor, and his reign was from AD 272 to AD 337. Constantine's calendar reform laid the foundation for a massive deception. Sunday as the day on which the Messiah was resurrected, and Saturday as the Bible's seventh-day Sabbath. Constantine's drive for a unified empire between paganism and Christianity was founded upon his desire for greater power. Constantine's Sunday law. Well, you may have heard of this, especially if you do keep Saturday Sabbath, as I have too for many generations. In AD 321, Constantine, the Emperor of Rome, by civil enactments, made the venerable day of the sun, which day was then notable for its veneration, the weekly rest day of the empire. The enforcement of the weekly observance of Sunday gave official recognition to the week of 7 days and resulted in the introduction of it into the official civil calendar of Rome. The Romans passed that calendar down to us, and in it we have still the ancient planetary titles of the days of the week. And that's by Odom, and we'll be leaving all these quotes below so you can look up the references yourself.
Constantine was foremost a politician and a military strategist. He issued at least 6 decrees relating to Sunday observance, but all were for purely political reasons. These decrees were, first, March 7, 321, a law commanding that the townspeople, courts, and trades to cease from labor on the day of the sun. Second, June 321, emancipation and manumission of slaves allowed on the day of the sun. Third, Christian soldiers allowed to attend Sunday church services. Fourth, pagan troops were required to recite a prayer while on the drill field on Sunday. Fifth, Sunday declared a market day throughout the entire year. And sixth, a decree supporting the Council of Nicaea's decision that Christ's resurrection should henceforth be observed on the day of the sun, that's Easter Sunday, rather than commemorating the death of Christ on the actual crucifixion Passover date of Nisan, that is Abib, 14.
So all of Constantine's acts had an ulterior motive for his political gain, and the Council of Nicaea was no exception. The biblical calendar was annihilated through this movement in political gain.
The significance of the Council of Nicaea is found in the fact that the decree outlawed the lunar calendar. Quote, since the 2nd century A.D., there had been a divergence of opinion about the date of celebrating the Paschal, that is Easter, anniversary of the Lord's Passion, that is his death, burial, and resurrection. The most ancient practice appears to have been the observance of the 14th, the Passover date, 15th and 16th days of the lunar month. Regardless of the day of the Julian week these dates might fall on from year to year. The bishops of Rome, desirous of enhancing the observance of Sunday as a church festival, ruled that the annual celebration should always be held on the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday following the 14th day of the lunar month. In Rome, Friday and Saturday of Easter were fast days, and on Sunday the fast was broken by partaking in communion. This controversy lasted almost 2 centuries until Constantine intervened on behalf of the Roman bishops and outlawed the other groups.
Well, the point of contention appeared deceptively simple: Passover versus Easter. And the issues at stake, however, were immense. The only way to determine when Passover occurs is to use the biblical lunar solar calendar, for only by observing the moon can one count to the 14th day of the new moon. And there is an example of the lunar solar calendar in the upper right corner, with the month starting out at the dark phase of the moon, and then the first quarter phase would be the first week of your month, or the first Sabbath, then the full moon, the middle of the month, and then the last phase, the third week of the month. Yes, please, go ahead, brother.
I might interject that the calendar we're seeing, of course, is not a Julian calendar. This is the Lord's calendar. This is the heavenly calendar, which is lunar. It's aligned for the moon.
And it's not Jewish either. It was given to Israel. And I believe Adam and Eve had this calendar. It was passed down through the ages to know when their days and months in Sabbaths would be. So because the seventh-day Sabbath was also calculated from the new moon, a ruling in favor of Easter being observed on a Julian date would also affect the seventh-day Sabbath. And prior to this time, true Christians commemorated Passover, ignoring the pagan Easter. And this is also a lunar calendar up here on the screen, showing the Sabbaths along with the phases of the moon. And this is a very good quote from the Universal Jewish Encyclopedia, page 410. The new moon is still, and the Sabbath originally was, dependent upon the lunar cycle. And the Jews know this, and they have it in their writings.
Persecution of the churches in Asia for keeping Passover on the 14th. Up until the Council of Nicaea, the Christian Easter, especially in the East, had been celebrated for the most part at the time of the Jewish Passover. But, on the contrary, in Europe, quote, some earlier, some later, were incalculated the months. The Europeans were placing their cycle at the equinox and were celebrating the Passover on the next full moon after the equinox. These contentions had agitated the churches of Asia since the time of the Roman bishop Victor, who had persecuted the churches of Asia for following the, quote, 14th day heresy, as they called it, in reference to the Passover. Again, the citation is given below.
It was ruled the future Easter observance was to be rendered independent of Jewish calculation. The civil legislation enforced the pagan Julian calendar, in that you can see above here, and the calendars calculate time, and at the Council of Nicaea it was decreed that Christians were to remain independent of Jewish calculation, because the paganized Christians did not want to be associated with the Jews in any way.
At the Council of Nicaea, the last thread was snapped, which was connecting Christianity to Judaism. It was determined that Christians would have nothing to do with the Jews, and that they shouldn't have to calculate Easter by the Jewish calculated calendar. This is a fact well known to Jewish scholars and historians. The Jewish Publication Society of America published the following statement. Heinrich Gretz, in History of the Jews, states, quote, "Then the world witnessed the hitherto undreamt of spectacle of the first general convocation of Nicaea, consisting of several hundred bishops and priests, with the emperor at its head. Christianity thought to celebrate its triumph, but only succeeded in betraying its weakness and internal disunion. For on the occasion of this, its first official appearance, in all the splendor of its plenitude and of spiritual and temporal power, there remained no trace of its original character. At the Council of Nicaea, the last thread was snapped which connected Christianity to its parent stock. The festival of Easter had up until now been celebrated for the most part at the same time as the Jewish Passover, and indeed upon the days calculated and fixed by the Sanhedrin in Judea for its celebration. But in the future, its observance was to be rendered altogether independent of the Jewish calendar." Continued, "For it is unbecoming beyond measure that on this holiest of festivals we should follow the customs of the Jews. Henceforth let us have nothing in common with this odious people. Our Savior has shown us another path. It would indeed be absurd if the Jews were able to boast that we are not in a position to celebrate the Passover without the aid of their rules or calculations." These remarks were attributed to the Emperor Constantine and became the guiding principle of the Church, which was now to decide the fate of the Jews.
Well, notice that the decrees of the Council of Nicaea are clearly perceived by the Jews themselves to be the act of the Roman Church staying independent of the Jewish calendar. And the Council of Nicaea accomplished three goals, all of which are still in effect today. The decrees serve to 1. Standardize the planetary week of 7 days, making Dies Solis, or Sunday, the first day of the week, with Dies Saturni, Saturday, the last day of the week. 2. To guarantee that Passover and Easter would never fall on the same day. 3. Exalt Dies Solis, or Sunday, as the day of worship for both pagans and Christians.
By establishing Easter on the Sunday following the full moon after the vernal equinox, the Roman Catholic Church guaranteed that it would never fall on the Jewish Passover. At the same time, the Jews were still using the lunar solar calendar of creation, calculating by the barley harvest law of Moses. Because the 7-day weeks of the biblical lunations cycled differently than the pagan solar calendar, Passover, the 6th day of the biblical week, would fall on different days of the Julian week. Likewise, first fruits, the true day of the resurrection, on the first day of the biblical week, appeared to wander through the Julian week, sometimes falling on Dies Martinus and Dies Veneris, etc., and only rarely coinciding with Dies Solis.
So, vestiges of the resulting confusion when attempts are made to reconcile a solar calendar to a lunar solar calendar may still be seen. Easter is never on the same date of the Gregorian calendar from one year to the next, and the Feast of First Fruits, when calculated by the biblical calendar, always falls on the 16th of the month, a first day of the week. Easter, however, because it is linked to a corruption of lunar calculation, does not fall on any specific date, as does Christmas, not a specific day of the month. such as Thanksgiving in the United States, which always falls on the fourth Thursday of November. Thus, while the true date of the resurrection always falls on the same day of the week and the same date of the month, Easter on the Gregorian calendar appears to float through March and April. Well, there's an example of the biblical calendar up here. You would start out with day 1 for New Moon Day, and then you have 6 working days and a Sabbath, the 8th day of the month. And then you have 6 working days, and then the 14th, which is Passover. The next day is a Sabbath, and the first day of unleavened bread. And then the first day of the working week is the first fruits. And it's always that way. It's always, Passover is always a preparation day. Sabbath is always unleavened bread, and first fruits is always the first day of the week. And as it shows up here, Yeshua died on the 14th, Passover. He rested in the grave, and he rose as first fruits. So we have, I hope you will go to the website, many more videos explaining the lunar calendar.
The long-term effect was that Easter Sunday entered the Christian paradigm as the day of Yeshua's resurrection. The corollary to this realignment of time calculation was that the day preceding Easter Sunday, Saturday, became forever after the true biblical Sabbath. This is the true significance of Constantine's Sunday law, and it laid the foundations for the modern assumption that a continuous weekly cycle has always existed. The biblical calendar outlawed. The fallout from this edict was immediate. The law made it illegal to use the biblical calendar, and it persecuted those who still tried to use it. David Sadisky says that it was no more possible under Constantine to apply the old, that is, the biblical calendar. In subsequent years, the Jews went through quote, iron and fire, from Sadisky. The Christian papal Roman emperors forbade the Jewish computation of the calendar and did not allow the announcement of the feast days.
So Gratz says the Jewish and apostolic Christian communities were left in utter doubt concerning the most important religious decisions as pertaining to their festivals. It was outlawed, and they were persecuted for using the calendar in the heavens. And the immediate consequence was the fixation of the calculation of the Hebrew calendar by Hillel II. Well, once Constantine commanded that they couldn't use the calendar in the heavens, the Jews had to scramble and make up a calendar, and that is what Hillel II did. He made up a calendar set for them to follow. And we did a video on this, and I'll post that at the end here for you.
The decrees of Nicaea destroyed the temple of the law in Judea, as it were, and the ancient regulations of Moses for harmonizing the course of the moon with that of the sun was ultimately replaced by calculations involving the vernal equinox, after which the nearest full moon was chosen to be the Paschal moon. From this equinoctial point, the Catholic Church built up her ecclesiastical calendar and its Easter festival.
And Christopher Clavis observes, it is easy to gloss over the real significance of the Council of Nicaea and its bearing upon the Jewish system of time. The Church desired to depart from the Jewish calculation and to adopt a movable feast. Yet, in the end, it turned out that both the Jewish and Roman Catholic festivals come to be computed from came to be computed from the same point of time, which would be the vernal equinox. And that is when Easter is still on the calendar, on the Roman Gregorian calendar. It's always after the spring equinox.
Continued use of the lunar solar calendar in face of intense persecution. The controversy over calendars was not resolved with Constantine's edict. Rather, it opened the door for religious persecution of Christians. By Christians, those who were convicted by conscience that the Passover, as well as the Sabbath, should be observed by the biblical calendar, were unwilling to accept the civil legislation in the realm of religion. These continued to use the lunar solar calendar in the face of intense persecution.
That would take a lot of bravery to face persecution and still continue. So Christians on the fringes of the Roman Empire used the biblical reckoning centuries after Constantine. When Catholic Princess Margaret married Scottish King Malcolm III, 1031 to 1093, was his reign. In 1070, she was instrumental in establishing Catholicism in Scotland. And prior to that time, Scottish priests still married and still observed Passover on Abib 14, regardless of what the Julian date was, and still worshipped on the seventh-day Sabbath, likely by the biblical calendar as well, as they were observing Passover by that calendar. And this is up here a picture of the oldest calendar found, and it was found in a Scottish field. So we did a video on this too. We have many, but this is one of the oldest calendars, and it was found in Scotland. But here, when he married this Princess Margaret, it sounds like they became Catholic.
The Council of Nicaea was the culmination of many years of compromise with paganism. It climaxed in legislation which outlawed the only calendar by which the true seventh-day Sabbath and also the true date for the resurrection may be found. The venerable day of the sun. The spirit of concession to paganism opened the way for a still further disregard of heaven's authority. Satan, working through the unconsecrated leaders of the church, tampered with the fourth commandment also, and essayed to set aside the ancient Sabbath day which Yahweh had blessed and sanctified, Genesis 2:2-3, and in its stead to exalt the festival observance of the heathen as the venerable day of the sun.
Well, we know that this is just one of the quotes, Constantine and Sunday. Sunday was another work day in the Roman Empire, and on March 7, 321, however, Roman Constantine issued a civil decree making Sunday a day of rest from labor. And here's another quote from a Catholic catechism that they gather on the day of the sun, the day after the Jewish Sabbath. That would be on a Gregorian calendar. And then another one here, maybe many of you have heard some of these, applying it to changing Sunday to Saturday, Saturday to Sunday worship. But this applies to both Saturday and Sunday. They were both proclaimed by Constantine as worship days.
Counterfeit worship. Counterfeit worship requires a counterfeit calendar, and the Council of Nicaea provided it. The biblical calendation was supplanted by the pagan solar calendation, and the planetary week replaced by the biblical week, which depended upon the moon. Excuse me, it replaced the biblical week, which depended upon the moon.
So this planetary week was paganism's counterfeit of the true biblical week and that was instituted by the Creator in the beginning of Earth's history. In the counterfeit week employed in ancient paganism, the venerable day of the sun was esteemed by the heathen above the other 6 days because it was regarded as sacred to the sun, the chief of the planetary deities. Just as the true Sabbath is inseparably linked with the biblical week, so the false Sabbath of pagan origin needed a weekly cycle. And thus we have found that the planetary week of paganism is Sunday's twin sister, and that the two counterfeit institutions were linked together. Well, Constantine, he made Sunday the first day of the week, but he kept a 7th day on the Gregorian calendar for the Jewish people to have a 7th day, and it was on Saturn's day. It was not on the biblical calendar. So you need to know if it's real or fake. And Saturday is also a counterfeit worship day.
When the historical facts of the Julian calendar are understood, it becomes clear that Sunday is not the only worship day founded upon paganism. Saturday, or Dies Saturni, is the original first day of the pagan week. It's also a counterfeit. As the 7th day of the modern week, it is a counterfeit for the true 7th day Sabbath of the Bible.
And that's an interesting picture over here, Brother Pete, where Saturn was the first day of the week and Constantine moved it to the 7th day.
Yes, this is a calendar found on a bathhouse in Rome, and it was, 104 A.D., and it shows the calendar before Constantine shifted it.
Okay. And that is even published by one of the Adventist publishing companies in Southern. So the enforcement of the weekly observance of Sunday by Constantine in 321 A.D. gave official recognition to the week of the 7 days and resulted in the introduction of it into the official civil calendar of Rome.
The aftershocks of the Council of Nicaea are still felt worldwide today. Of any direct or indirect attack against the truth of Yahweh, this one act has had the most profound and far-reaching effect. All the world has united to using this calendar in its modern Gregorian form. Entire churches based their religious observance from this pagan calendar. The foundation laid by Constantine's Sunday law is the reason why Saturday and Sunday keepers worship on the days they do. The decrees of Nicaea legislated into place an entire counterfeit system of religion with its pagan solar calendar. Thus, the knowledge of the Creator's calendar with his true 7th-day Sabbath has been buried under the accumulated weight of centuries of continuously cycling weeks.
So all the world has united in using this calendar in its modern Gregorian form. And this calendar is the Roman calendar named after Pope Gregory the 13th. So please join us for worship on the true Sabbath days. And that is placed in the calendar in the heavens. And we invite you to go to our website to access more information about the changes from our heavenly calendar to a paper calendar on your wall. There are a lot more related topics, and we invite you to go there and search them out. And so I thank you for being here today, and I hope you will join us again real soon.
Absolutely.